We did need to. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Shapiro. I'm the president of the American Jewish Committee, and I'm delighted to see such a huge turnout. I'm sorry that we don't have seats for all of you, but it's almost like having the Beatles here today to have Sebastian Kurz. I want to welcome the many influential officials, diplomatic people, staff members, NGOs, Jewish council leaders. We're very impressed with this turnout, but we all know why it isn't for me. So, I've had the pleasure of introducing Sebastian Kurz at an event we held in Jerusalem, and all I can tell you is that it was a very meaningful and powerful experience. He's a terrific speaker with a tremendous commitment to values that are very important to us. So, with that, I'd like to actually ask Daniel Schwumenthal, who's our AJC Transatlantic Institute Director, to come up and make the introduction.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundeskanzler, Your Excellencies, honorable members of the European Parliament, the Austrian Parliament, and the Federal Belgian Parliament, dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to welcome you to what is, without exaggeration, we believe, an historic event. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first time that an EU head of government is speaking here in Brussels specifically on the issues of EU-Israel relations and Jewish life in Europe. And, dear Chancellor Kurz, your speech is not coming one moment too soon. Just 3 months ago, Israel's most acclaimed author, Amos Oz, passed away. Amos Oz was also a co-founder of Peace Now. He recounted how his father explained that during the war, before the war in Europe, the walls were covered with graffiti saying, "Jews, go back to Palestine." So we did, he said. And now the walls are saying, "Jews, get out of Palestine." And as Amos Oz explained, if Jews must not exist outside nor inside Palestine, it means Jews must not exist at all. And this is exactly the message that French Jewish philosopher Alain Finkielkraut received on the streets of Paris just last month, when he was accosted both as a dirty Jew and a dirty Zionist, and when he was told both to go back to Tel Aviv, but that he would die anyway. He would later echo the comments of Amos Oz and said, I quote, "I am home, but not to these people. Those who shout, 'Go back to Tel Aviv,' believe Israel is stolen land. So what they are saying is that I have no place here, I have no place there, I have no place on earth." Ideas and words have consequences, ladies and gentlemen. Less than a mile from where we have gathered here today is the Jewish Museum, where Mehdi Nemmouche killed 4 people. His trial just ended earlier this month. And during that trial, his lawyers not only claimed their client was innocent, they claimed that the entire attack was staged by Israel's Mossad. So we were treated to a spectacle here in the heart of Europe that the Belgian lawyers of a French jihadi defended an anti-Semitic attack with an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. The distinction and the differentiation between Israelis and Jews in diaspora, if it ever existed in the heads of the haters, is increasingly disappearing. And Israelis and Jews in the diaspora are increasingly facing the same enemies, quite literally the same enemies. The same Iranian regime that is now threatening Israel, now also from Syria, is plotting terror attacks on Jewish kindergartens in Germany. The same Hezbollah that is threatening Israel from Lebanon is blowing up buses in Bulgaria and spreading vile anti-Semitism on the streets of Berlin, of London, Amsterdam, and throughout Europe. And the same BDS movement that may be targeting Israeli trade, artists, and scientists is more often used as a tool to torment Jewish students on European campuses and Jewish members of various trade unions and certain political parties here in Europe. So the challenges for EU-Israel relations and Jewish life in Europe are not insignificant, but there are also opportunities to deepen a strategic alliance between Europe and Israel based on shared values and shared interests, and securing and cementing the more than 2,000 years of Jewish life on this continent. We are therefore very grateful to you, Chancellor Kurz, for your efforts, and we are eager to hear your address. But before that, I have the great honor to introduce the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, David Harris.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Daniel. For me, this is more than an institutional gathering. It's a very personal moment as well. I would never have foreseen in my decades of diplomacy that it would be the Chancellor of Austria who would be here in Brussels making, as you said, Daniel, this landmark speech, speaking about the relationship between the European Union and Israel, speaking about the well-being of Jewish life in Europe. I come from an Austrian Jewish family. My father was an Austrian Jewish Holocaust survivor. My father spent decades, and the Chancellor knows this, detesting Austria, not only for its wartime record of betrayal, but for its post-war record of denial. It was not until 1990 and a predecessor of yours, Sebastian, Franz Wernicke, that Austria began to come to grips with its own past. But after that, there was again a gap. And into the gap stepped what for many was an improbable personality. A young man in his early 20s, seen as politically very sophisticated, but unknown, substantively, if you will, ideologically. And this young man, Sebastian Kurz, first as foreign minister and now as chancellor, has blazed new trails for Austria in its reckoning with history and in its recognition that the past must inform the future. Most remarkable for us was last June in Jerusalem, of all places, where the American Jewish Committee hosted our global forum with more than 2,500 people in attendance. Sebastian Kurz came to Jerusalem, and for the first time in post-war Austrian history, he said to the audience and to the world that the well-being of the Jewish people and the bilateral relationship between Austria and Israel are matters of Staatsräson, of the national interest of Austria. This was a turning point, and he received a sustained standing ovation. We felt there was one piece of the puzzle that was still missing, though, and that was for Sebastian Kurz's message to be heard not only in Vienna, not only in Jerusalem, not only in Washington, but precisely here in Brussels, Europe's capital. And so for the American Jewish Committee and our transatlantic office, it is both a pleasure and a very special privilege to introduce to this distinguished audience the Federal Chancellor of Austria, our good friend, Sebastian Kurz.
Dear David Harris, thank you so much for your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues at the European institutions, it's an honor for me to be here with you today, and I would like to thank you for your kind invitation to come here. I'm very happy to see familiar faces from our meeting in Jerusalem and our conference against anti-Semitism in Vienna last year. As an Austrian Chancellor, speaking to a Jewish community, you will always carry the heavy burden of a dark and unforgettable past. And indeed, as I look back on the horrible crimes of the Shoah, I feel grief and guilt on behalf of my nation, and this will also not change in the future. As I look at our present day, however, I feel gratitude for our progress of reconciliation. And as I look at tomorrow, I feel optimism that in spite of all the challenges EU-Israel relations and Jewish life in Europe have, we will have a bright future together. Growing up, when I went to school, I had the chance to have personal conversations with Austrian Shoah survivors. And these conversations left a lasting impression on me. It is hard to imagine what it must have felt to live through persecution and suffering in the way that these Shoah survivors have done. And it is hard to imagine what it must have meant to lose friends, family, and loved ones. And it is hard to imagine what it must have meant to lose your home and your country, to be abandoned and rejected. But in spite of all the pain and injustice that these innocent people had gone through, in my conversation with them, I did not sense any hate, no desire for revenge, and no bitterness at all. They seemed sad as they spoke about their past, sure and understandable, but they also had something special about them. Grateful to have survived, happy to live in peace after all, and proud to see their children and grandchildren live in much better conditions in free and open societies. And this attitude continues to impress me. It is a sign of greatness and an example to all of us. To not let the evil bring you down, but to respond by building something greater within you and around you. And for me, one of the strongest symbols of this attitude is the State of Israel. Built during the darkest days with almost no chances at the beginning, Israel has become one of the strongholds of democracy, rule of law, and prosperity in the Middle East and in the whole world. And I, together with many others, can only thank the people of Israel for that remarkable contribution to our global community. Given where Austria started from only 2 generations ago, I am grateful that Jewish life in Austria and relations between Israel and Austria are today strong again. Over the past year of our new Austrian government, we have made a sincere effort to strengthen this cooperation even further. In 2018, at the 80th anniversary of the November pogroms, our parliament held a day of national remembrance. We invited 70 Shoah survivors from Israel to Austria to attend a ceremony at our National Assembly. For some of those guests, this was the first time to return to Vienna since the dark days of the Nazi rule. And I will never forget the moment when I saw one of the women in the group explaining to her Israeli grandchildren that this used to be her home, which she had to leave a long time ago. And we were honored that she and so many others found the strength to return to Austria and to tell their story. Furthermore, we decided as Republic of Austria to build a wall of names, a memorial in Vienna, where all 66,000 Jewish victims of the Shoah from Austria will be remembered by name. Kurz, the initiator, who has fought for his idea for a long time now, is driven by the wonderful mission to remember all Jewish victims of the Shoah, especially those families who were wiped out without survivors, with no children or grandchildren to bear witness. But our work of remembrance is not yet done. In Belarus, we supported the realization of a memorial at Mali Trostinets, where almost 10,000 Austrian Jews were killed in 1942. The memorial has just been completed, and next week I will travel there for its official inauguration. But apart from these bilateral efforts to strengthen our relationship and cooperation, especially our EU Council presidency focused on the future of Jewish life in Europe. In today's political climate, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are often two sides of the same coin. To combat both and to raise awareness of their danger, it was one of my personal priorities to host a global conference to fight not only against anti-Semitism, but to also put anti-Zionism on the political agenda. So in November last year, representatives from Jewish communities across the world gathered in Vienna to discuss our biggest challenges around fighting anti-Zionism and protecting Jewish life in Europe. And I want to thank you, David Harris, for your friendship and for your commitment in making this event happen, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank you once again today for that. The outcome of the conference made a contribution to the EU Council Declaration on the fight against anti-Semitism, with concrete steps that EU member states will take to fight propaganda against Jews, both new and also old one. The critical points of this declaration were difficult to negotiate, but with a coordination in efforts of Jewish communities across Europe, the Austrian EU presidency and also France, we succeeded in the end. Europe is definitely this continent of safety, of liberty and rule of law. To live up to this heritage, we must ensure that every member of our societies is and also feels safe and free. No one must ever feel afraid to walk in the streets of any European country, no matter who they are, where they are from, or what their faith is. We owe this assurance to all people in Europe, and especially to the Jewish community. But we all know that a lot of work still has to be done. In Austria, our parliament recently did a study on anti-Semitism in our country. Overall, and that's the positive point, traditional anti-Semitism in Austria has seen a steady decline. But however, especially among migrant communities from the Middle East, anti-Semitic sentiments are increasing. Social media and propaganda from abroad appear to play a significant role also in our societies. And also studies at the European level show that we have not yet overcome anti-Semitism in its different forms. These findings are a warning signal for me, a warning sign which I take very seriously. In Austria, we are taking concrete steps to prevent especially our youth from all backgrounds to be influenced by these dangerous ideas. Our legislation continues to be very clear. Any form of Shoah denial, whether it is based on neo-Nazism or any other extremist ideology is strictly forbidden and punished by law. And in addition, we are committed to a culture of commemoration in our schools. It is our goal to bring as many students as possible to memorial sites like Mauthausen in Austria, so that they can see with their own eyes the evils that were committed there. As a further step, we are establishing a documentation center on radical and political Islam. This new entity will track and identify routes and hotspots of these dangerous ideas in order to fight them effectively. In this context, we strengthened the legislation of our Symbol Act, prohibiting the symbols of extremism of organizations like Hezbollah or Hamas to avoid the proliferation of their violent ideas in Austria. But our historical responsibility does not end at our own borders. We also have a special responsibility towards the State of Israel and the security needs of the Jewish people there. When I had the privilege to visit Israel in the past, I was always impressed by the beauty, hospitality, and richness of the culture. And whenever I compare Israel's innovative and fast-growing economy to what we are used here in Europe today, I'm humbled. I'm really humbled by how far this country has come during the last 70 years. And it shows us that in many areas we can learn from Israel today. But besides all of this, we must not forget that Israel as a nation has yet not found peace at all. Israel is under constant pressure to defend itself and protect its citizens. For those of us who have grown up in peace and stability in Europe, in the US, or other privileged regions in the world, this is very easy to forget. And many are too quick to judge. Israel is often criticized, but whenever one country criticizes another, whenever judgments are made about others, people or nations, we must not forget their circumstances, and we must test the motivation behind the judgment. Is this criticism serving justice, or is it serving prejudice? This is always important because, especially in today's treatment of Israel and in the relationship that we as EU want to build with Israel, we Austrians try to do our best to be honest supporters and friends of Israel. This does not mean that we always have the same views or agree on everything, but it means that we must always remember that Israel is fighting to be a free country, a liberal democracy, while being under constant threat. And there is more we share in the struggle than could ever divide us. Israel is a nation that does not have the privilege to count Germany or Switzerland as its neighbors, as we do in Austria. But the neighbors are Syria and Iran, just around the corner. And we must not forget that reality whenever we judge Israel's action, because it's a different neighborhood they have. So we do our best to oppose one-sided resolutions and actions against Israel on the European and the global level. This is the goal we have had in the UN Human Rights Council, where we are currently a member, and we have decided to vote against the proposed accountability resolution because it seems to be politically biased against Israel. This does not mean that Israel is a perfect country and that there is no reason to criticize Israel, but I think we should always remember that the circumstances for Israel are very different to our region here in Europe. In conclusion, I would like to take the opportunity to thank once again the American Jewish Committee for hosting me today, the Jewish communities of Austria and Europe for their friendship, and the State of Israel for being one of our most reliable partners internationally. I look forward to continuing to work in future together with you to build strong EU-Israel relations, because I think we need them, to protect Jewish life in Europe, and of course to fight together against anti-Semitism here in Europe. Thank you very much.
Don't show it. Now you know why we were so eager to have you all here this morning. Sebastian. Come. I want to thank the Chancellor for a wonderful speech, a necessary speech. I particularly want to thank him for making abundantly clear, as I hope everyone will agree, that when we speak about anti-Semitism today, we cannot speak about anti-Semitism without referencing anti-Zionism. And this was the conceptual breakthrough with the November conference that you hosted, to put this squarely on the map. I want to thank you as well for reminding all of us outside the Middle East that Israel's neighbors are not Switzerland and Germany, though we all might wish that one day they could be. I want to thank you for the vote at the UN Human Rights Council, that you will move from abstention to rejection on this key accountability vote, and we hope on other such votes that come under the noxious agenda item number 7, which uniquely singles out Israel from all the nations on earth for separate treatment. And I want to thank you for making clear, as I hope other European nations will follow suit, that the symbols of Hezbollah and other terrorist groups will not be permitted in European streets, not even under the so-called guise of the political wing of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Hezbollah is Hezbollah. And you're showing leadership again. So for all this and so much more, but not wanting to give an additional speech, we at the American Jewish Committee would like to give you this gift, which is a street scene of Vienna by a very noted then Austro-Hungarian artist named Luigi Casimir. And the dedication reads, "Presented to Sebastian Kurz, Federal Chancellor of Austria, in abiding appreciation for your friendship to the Jewish people and the State of Israel, your recognition of historical responsibility, and your commitment to democratic values, American Jewish Committee, March 21st, 2019.
ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome you to a small reception, which will take place in the main building where you came in. You go up the beautiful marble staircase. But I would like to ask you to wait a little bit in this room until the Chancellor has left. He will later join us for the reception. But if you could now, for a few brief moments, stay here, and then we will all move to the reception and have a good discussion, hopefully. Thank you very much.